That is Senator Lindsey Graham, who's been a strong defender of our national security. I think one of the strongest defenders of our national security in the United States Senate. Senator, thanks for being with us.
Thank you. We had a good briefing by the FBI yesterday. This case file, in my view, should have never been closed. We're not fighting a crime here. We're trying to surveil people who show terrorist sympathies. And if you can't prove a crime, doesn't mean we shouldn't keep watching you. And when the person says, I'm being picked on because of my faith, that's no reason to abandon the case. So I'm not blaming the FBI agents in question. I'm blaming the policy of Barack Obama of leading from behind and turning the war into a crime.
All right, so I want to talk about that because, Senator, one of the things that has had me concerned for a number of years, and you and I have talked about this extensively, is the fact that the administration views this as, and you and I are both lawyers, but they view this as crimes. I mean, they view these as criminal actions. You investigate it and you treat it as a crime and you prosecute it as a crime. This situation with this particular situation in Orlando, I think maybe highlights more than some of the others, although I think they all have their flaws, that there's something fundamentally wrong within our either intelligence gathering or the messaging that's coming from the administration. We have the report that came out from the Homeland Security just last week where they said stop using certain words. But this goes beyond certain words. This was a guy that was on the watch list twice. You were in that briefing, and you're saying there's fundamentally a flaw here.
Yeah, here's the flaw, is that the idea of surveilling somebody based on their conduct is what you do during a time of war. We should keep a wary eye on anybody who suggests allegiance or sympathy toward ISIL. So this guy was interviewed twice, 3 times within a year and a half period. He went to a mosque that was known to be radical. He was an associate or friend of a guy who became a suicide bomber. He told co-workers who was a member of different terrorist groups. He showed sympathies toward radical Islam. Why did they close the file? My view is that the Obama administration has made huge mistakes in the war on terror. When we capture a high-value target, like Osama bin Laden's son-in-law, we read them their Miranda rights and put them in the federal court. What we should do is hold them as enemy combatants and gather intelligence under the law of war. We've stopped all of that. There are going to be less FBI agents in 2017 than there were in 2013 because of budget cuts. The president is out there blaming everybody, the Europeans, the Israelis, the Arabs, the Republicans, for the war going badly, when in fact he's the reason that radical Islam has risen so much.
Jordan, you've got a question for the senator, I think a really important one.
Yeah, that's right. And we've now heard from the CIA director, John Brennan, who's testified to the U.S. Senate this morning. It was open, and he talked about the terrorists utilizing refugee flows, smuggling routes, and even legitimate methods of travel. It seems to contradict some of what we hear, the rhetoric back and forth, which there's been a lot of rhetoric this week out of President Obama and maybe presidential candidates. But the truth is, when you have the CIA director telling everybody what we're so concerned about, which is that these terrorists are going to utilize the same kind of open avenues as drug cartels, but to carry out attacks.
Well, I think that's absolutely right, but the point is deeper. President Obama is trying to marginalize the threat. First thing out of his mouth was gun laws, and this wasn't directed by ISIS. He's trying to suggest that he has ISIS in a box and that his approach to radical Islam is working. What the CIA director told us is even though they're losing ground on the battlefield, they're more lethal than ever. This guy in Orlando responded to ISIL's call because he believes they're winning. And what Brennan is trying to tell us, the CIA director, is that the vacuum that Obama allowed to create by withdrawing from Iraq and not helping the Free Syrian Army 4 years ago when it mattered,
right,
has been filled in over the years by thousands of radical jihadists coming from Western nations and the United States. And if they haven't been destroyed, they're out there moving around using methods of travel that we all use. And contrary to what the president tells you, the threat to ISIL is greater today than it was before.
Let me play, if we have it. Do we have the statement, Will, from the CIA Director Brennan about, despite the progress on ISIL on the battlefield, what is exactly, because this really underscores what the senator just said. I'd like to play that when we have it. Tell me. Senator, kind of following up on that, actually, let me, we've got this, but I want to hear this is so our audience can understand the context exactly what you just said. John Brennan just moments ago.
Unfortunately, despite all our progress against ISIL on the battlefield and in the financial realm, our efforts have not reduced the group's terrorism capability and global reach. The resources needed for terrorism are very modest, and the group would have to suffer even heavier losses on territory, manpower, and money for its terrorist capacity to decline significantly.
So, Senator, I want to follow this up with a question to you on this because you're someone that served in our military as a judge advocate general. You know the military. The situation, and you've been to Syria, I know, many, many times. The situation with ISIS, militarily, what do you think the approach needs to be at this point?
Okay, yeah, you meant Iraq. I've been to Iraq and I've been to Syria.
Yes.
I don't know if I'd have made it back.
Yeah, right, Iraq. I'm sorry. Yeah.
So I've been to Iraq and Afghanistan about 37 times.
Yeah.
Here's what I've been saying. Remember during the presidential debate? I didn't last that long, but here's what I said. If you don't realize you need more American boots on the ground to help the Iraqi army and a regional force to go in to destroy the caliphate in Syria, you're not ready to be commander-in-chief. Everybody threw up their arms and said, we're war weary. I'm talking about 8,000 to 10,000 soldiers in Iraq. Guess how many we have today? When you count the people that are off the books, we're well over 5,000 U.S. forces doing exactly what I called for 2 years ago. So we are making progress in Iraq, but we're still short of what we need to liberate Mosul. Syria is the problem. Obama is not trying to destroy ISIL in Syria. He's trying to contain them, diminish them, and get out of office. The people we're training to fight ISIL in Syria are Kurds. They're the YPG. They're Marxist Kurds, communist Kurds, who are the cousins of the PKK,
Yep.
a terrorist organization in Turkey. They're not Arabs. There is no way in the world they're going to go into Raqqa. They don't want to go into Raqqa. They wouldn't be accepted in Raqqa. So Obama's strategy to destroy ISIL inside of Syria won't work. They don't care about replacing Assad. If you leave Assad in power, then ISIL will be able to recruit forever because he's a proxy of Iran. We have no strategy inside of Syria to destroy ISIL. This is all an illusion and a lie. And the longer the war goes on, there are going to be more Orlandos.
All right, let me ask the last question here, Senator, and that is, you did run for president of the United States. You do understand national security better than most of your colleagues, and you have some very bright colleagues, but you understand this. You understand the war. You understand the situation. If you were the president, what would be those actions you would take with regard to the dealing with ISIS right now? What would you do?
Number one, I would set aside the defense cuts that are giving us the smallest army since 1940, the smallest Navy since 1915. I would restore cuts to the FBI. We're going to have less agents in 2017 than we did in 2013. I would rebuild our capabilities. I would reinstitute interrogation policies that allow us to interrogate people we capture on the battlefield under the law of war. I would go on the offensive in Syria. I would get the Arab regional armies, including Turkey, form a force of which we will be a small part of, to go in and take the caliphate away from ISIL. I would take Raqqa away from ISIL by using regional forces that are Sunni so we could hold it. I would tell the Russians and the Iranians that Assad must go, seek a political reconciliation inside of Syria, but tell the Russians that we're not going to accept Assad and support the Free Syrians who want to take Assad, who's the puppet of Iran, down. And tell the Russians, if you want to fight for the butcher of Damascus, you're welcome to do so. I would treat ISIL as Germany, Assad as Japan, create a regional army of which we would be a part, and end this war.
All right. Senator Lindsey Graham, thank you for your comments. As always, we appreciate it, Senator.
Thanks much.